It's the closest thing we get to a playoff series typically here in Sacramento, a doubleheader or at least back-to-back games against the same team. But in game one of their doubleheader with the Denver Nuggets, the Kings blow a 20-point lead and lose. No Domantas Sabonis, no Mike Brown, who's in health and safety protocols, and maybe no chance for the Sacramento Kings until both of them are back. I'm sitting on the fence about how to feel about this game, and I'll explain why right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all regular season long. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports reporter and producer for ABC 10 News. And I'm sitting on the fence. I don't know how to feel. I'm still processing how to feel about this Kings game, which is terrible for podcasts because usually I like to turn on my camera and know what I'm going to say and know how I feel about a game and where I stand on the game. And believe me, I have takes about this Kings game, but I don't know if I should feel okay with how the game went, upset with how the game ended, mad at the loss. All things considered, I weigh in my expectations coming into this game, which were really low. The Kings playing above my expectations, it being an entertaining ball game. The Kings doing a really good job in some areas. But then on the other hand, I look at the Kings blowing a 20-point lead. I look on their home floor, and I realize, moral victories are for teams that suck, and we don't want to talk about moral victories anymore for a Kings team that we definitely believe does not suck. Like, I'm weighing back and forth. So let's dive into this, and maybe I'll actually get off my fence sitting here and pick a freaking side by the end of this podcast. And feel free to weigh in your thoughts as well. But this is everything that I'm taking into account, because honestly, like I came into the Golden One Center for tonight's game with very low expectations. I thought Nikola Jokic, without Domantas Sabonis, the Kings are going to get wiped. Like, Nikola Jokic and Domantas Sabonis are really the only two players that can do what the two of them do in the NBA, and I was really looking forward to seeing the two of them go head-to-head against each other. I think not just everybody in Sacramento and in Denver was. I think a lot of people in the NBA were looking forward to seeing the two of them go at it. Well, unfortunately, we've been robbed of that, at least for tonight's game. Who knows about tomorrow night's game with Domantas Sabonis reportedly being willing and potentially able to play through the thumb fracture that he is dealing with. But coming into tonight's game, when we knew Domantas Sabonis was not going to be playing, I thought the Kings had no chance. Or I should say I thought the Kings had little chance. I shouldn't say no chance because this team has surprised me before, and this team does have the talent capable of overcoming situations like this, at least on a periodic basis. I don't know about consistently, and that's something we'll talk about in today's show as well. But it didn't matter to me who started at center for the Kings tonight. Alex Len, Rashawn Holmes, Chimezie Metu, Neemias Queta, like, it didn't matter to me because ultimately the Sacramento Kings just needed a body, just needed a presence, someone who could be there and just not be horrible. And I didn't expect anybody to come in and be able to do anything or really handle Nikola Jokic. There isn't anybody in the league who can handle what Nikola Jokic does. And to see Nikola Jokic play in person, if you haven't gotten the opportunity to, he's just mesmerizing. The plays that he makes, the high basketball IQ that he has, his passing ability, his scoring ability. Taking all of that into account, I did not expect the Sacramento Kings to play as well as they did. They came out with a very spirited effort, and it looked like, on one hand, Sacramento was like, okay, we know Domantas Sabonis is out, and we have to play hard, and we have to try and jump on this team early if we're going to have any kind of chance. It also looked like this team maybe has been seething over the last few days that they haven't played basketball during the Christmas break based off of how last Friday night's loss to the Washington Wizards went. And I'm going to talk about that Wizards loss and that Hornets loss and bring it up and talk to you about why it's a little bit relevant. And maybe that'll help me make my decision about getting off of the fence sitting a little bit. But I thought the effort for the Kings was spirited. I thought the Kings as a team were playing really well. The ball was moving. Shots weren't necessarily falling early on, but for the Kings to build up a 20-point lead against the Denver Nuggets, I thought that was significant. However, I would call that, in the moment, and rightfully so, the most uncomfortable 20-point lead that I've seen, or one of the more uncomfortable 20-point leads that I've at least witnessed in my time covering the Sacramento Kings. Because you look at how the Kings were up by 20 points and you recognize, okay, Nikola Jokic has 2 points in the first half. Okay, the Denver Nuggets are getting a lot of good looks and are just missing a lot of good looks. And then you look at the Sacramento Kings, who are really struggling to shoot from three, and historically, if the Kings struggle to shoot from three-point range, they have a hard time winning. In fact, I think Brendan Nunez pointed this out. When the Kings shoot 10 or make 10 or fewer three-pointers, they're 0-7. Tonight's game, one of those 7 games. So the Nuggets were missing shots. The Kings were missing shots, and Nikola Jokic should have had a whole hell of a lot more assists in the first half than what he ended up having. Now, when he got going in the second half, it wasn't a surprise at all to see the Nuggets ultimately get better. They cut into that 20-point lead in a hurry, and at that point, as soon as that game got close and went back and forth, you knew that the Kings actually had a chance. There were multiple chances for the Kings in this fourth quarter to put this game away. And again, I think they have the personnel. They're capable of closing out games like this. The problem is, you're going up against a team that's not only best in the Western Conference, that team has a lot of players who have done it before, and they've done it together before. That's experience that the Sacramento Kings don't necessarily have as of late. Again, I appreciate the effort. I appreciate the fact that the Kings were able to build a 20-point lead. I wasn't surprised at all with how quickly it evaporated, and I wasn't surprised at all for the Denver Nuggets to take control the way that they did in the fourth quarter. Now, at the same time, too, on your home floor, blowing a 20-point lead isn't acceptable. It's never acceptable under any circumstance, regardless of the context. Like, if you are up 20 points at home, you should win that game. And I think most players in the Kings locker room feel that way. I think the entire Kings coaching staff feels that way. But in reality, unfortunately, the Kings weren't able to play a full 48 minutes against a Denver Nuggets team that has a 2-time MVP who did what he needed to do to, I wouldn't say Nikola Jokic really ever took over this game at any point. He just got going, got into a little bit of a rhythm, and of course his teammates play off of him. Michael Porter Jr., for some reason, only likes playing the Sacramento Kings and kills the Kings every time he plays. He dropped 30 points. Jamal Murray was big, had some big moments for the Denver Nuggets as a whole in this game. And when you look at the Sacramento Kings as a team, they've won the majority of their games this season. I would say actually almost all of their games this season as a team. 5, 6, 7 players finishing in double-figure scoring. That's the recipe for success for this Kings team, and it's worked excellent for them. They're one of the top offenses in the league. Here's the problem. When you are missing your most important player, it's not even an argument. As great as De'Aaron Fox is, Domantas Sabonis is the most important player on this Kings team. When you're missing him, you need more than that team output in order to win. The Kings had 5 players in double figures tonight. De'Aaron Fox had 26, Kevin Huerter had 21, Harrison Barnes had 13, Trey Lyles had 11 points, and Keegan Murray had 11 points. 5 players in double figures. You usually add Domantas Sabonis in double figures into that with his stat line, that's 6 players in double figures. Typically, that's a really, really good chance for the Kings to win. And had Sabonis been available tonight and still gotten this stat line from the other 6 players, I think the Kings, or the other 5, I think the Kings would have won this game. But when Domantas Sabonis is out, the Kings need more than just the team. The Kings, honestly, in my opinion, as long as Domantas Sabonis is out for however long Domantas Sabonis is out, the Kings are going to need Fox to be that superstar, and the Kings are going to need someone to be his Robin. And what I mean by that is De'Aaron Fox, I think, as long as Domantas Sabonis is out, if the Kings want to win consistently with Sabonis out, and I don't even know if that's possible, but if the Kings want to win consistently with Domantas Sabonis out, Fox needs to average close to, if not above, 30 points a game, and someone needs to be behind him in the 20s. At that point, then you could have 2 or 3 other guys sprinkling in 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 points. That's the only way that I see Sacramento having any kind of consistent success without Domantas Sabonis. They did good things as a team tonight offensively. Of course, if the three-point shot had fallen a little bit more, maybe you get a little more output out of Malik Monk, or Keegan Murray hits another shot, or Trey Lyles scores a couple more points. Yeah, you can do the math and say, well, the Kings would have won tonight, Matt, but I don't think it's that simple long-term. Short-term in tonight's game, sure, there's a lot of factors that play into it. Long-term, though, I think it's going to take a lot more than 4 or 5 guys barely scoring double figures for Sacramento to have any consistent chance. And a lot of it falls on De'Aaron Fox. Now let's talk about De'Aaron a little bit because I thought he played really, really hard. I thought De'Aaron Fox's energy right out of the gate was excellent. I thought he led by example. He was attacking. He was getting to the paint, kicking out to teammates. I don't have too much of a problem with what De'Aaron Fox did tonight. He scored 11 of his 26 points in the fourth quarter, which is good. Maybe could have been more, could have been great. But then you see what Luka Doncic did tonight with the Dallas Mavericks. A 60-point, 20-plus rebound, 10-assist game, right? Now, comparing the two is ridiculous because Luka's done something that's literally never been done in history. But at the same time, it's hard not to compare a player putting the entire team on his back when he needs to carry them to a win, and De'Aaron Fox, who put up 26 points, scored 11 in the fourth quarter, but didn't really take over at any point, which I think the Sacramento Kings need him to. I'm not trying to make this an anti-De'Aaron Fox thing or a gripe against De'Aaron Fox, because again, I don't think De'Aaron really did too much wrong in this game. What I'm saying is I think on games like this and consistently without Domantas Sabonis playing, De'Aaron is going to have to go into that kind of takeover mode more than he's going to play his team De'Aaron Fox mode. That's been the greatest part about Domantas Sabonis being on the Kings so far this season is De'Aaron hasn't had to be that every single night like he's had to be in the past for the Kings to have success. Well, now with Domantas Sabonis out, yes, it's a lot to ask De'Aaron. It's a ton to ask De'Aaron. I don't know if Jordy Fernandez, Mike Brown, or anybody feels comfortable asking De'Aaron to do that on a nightly basis. But I think that's what the Kings are going to need if they want to have any shot consistently. Hopefully, all of this is a moot point because hopefully Domantas Sabonis is able to come back and play through his injury, which I think is going to be a necessity. Let me tell you what pisses me off the most about this game. And honestly, it has nothing to do with this game. What pisses me off the most is the fact that the Kings had a chance to win this game. They lose. We expect them to lose against the Denver Nuggets. A lot of people in this building would have expected the Kings to lose even with Domantas Sabonis healthy. That's why the Charlotte loss and the Washington loss last week are so much more painful and so much more frustrating. Because had you handled your business in those two games, had you gone 3-0 in the first three games to start this homestand like you should have, defeating the Los Angeles Lakers, the Kings were supposed to do that. They were also supposed to beat the Hornets on the second night of a back-to-back and the Wizards on the second night of a back-to-back when both teams are amongst the worst in the Eastern Conference. The Kings should have been 3-0 in this road or homestand so far coming into tonight's game. They weren't. And this is an example of you don't handle your business ahead of time, it can come back to bite you a little bit because now the Kings are staring 1-4 in 5 out of these 6 games of this homestand right in the face. I don't have the greatest of expectations for how the Kings are going to be able to handle tomorrow night's game. We'll talk about that in a little bit as well. But if you handle your business ahead of time, you can accept losses like these. It makes it a little easier to swallow. Instead, the Kings have now lost 3 of their last 4, and it doesn't get any easier less than 24 hours from now. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for sports betting, info, stats, news, and analysis. And if you win on a BetOnline tonight, hopefully you made some money off of the Sacramento Kings, putting up a little more of a fight than I think people expected. I wasn't sure what the game line was. Maybe the Kings actually didn't cover it with the separation that the Nuggets were able to create on their 113-106 victory. I'm honestly not sure what the line was in this game, but I know the Kings were underdogs, especially with Domantas Sabonis being out. But whether it's betting on Kings games, you could bet on the NFL playoffs that are incoming all the way up to the Super Bowl, which is always a lot of fun, professional soccer, college sports, baseball when it comes back. They have it all on BetOnline. And if you love sports podcasts, they also have those on BetOnline as well. They're the fastest and easiest way to get their betting info. You can head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Malik Monk has to be better for the Sacramento Kings, period. And I'm not the only one that feels that way. Go to Twitter. Check out Malik Monk's Twitter. He tweeted he needs to be better and apologize to Sacramento. Now, I don't think that's necessary. I don't think he has to apologize for the way that he's playing. Every player goes through highs and lows, but the simple reality is the Kings need a whole lot more out of Malik Monk. But here's the catch. It's not just because Domantas Sabonis is out. Malik Monk is the captain of that second unit. He is the leader of that second unit, and if he is off, that second unit as a whole is off. Now, they get good individual contributions every now and then. I thought Trey Lyles had a fantastic night for the Sacramento Kings overall. But Malik Monk is the life and energy of that second unit a lot of times, and simply tonight and over the last handful of games, Malik has not been good enough. Somebody cut his face again so he can put a Band-Aid on and get back to Band-Aid Monk and revitalize that little, I shouldn't even say little, that like couple week stretch of his time here in Sacramento where not only was he scoring and putting up highlight plays, he was distributing and passing the basketball. And that's something the Kings absolutely could have used in tonight's game. As a whole, Malik Monk finished with 8 points, 3 of 10 shooting from the field, just 1 assist. Now, the assist numbers were down, period, for the Sacramento Kings. 1, because Domantas Sabonis was out, and 2, because shots were not falling, especially open perimeter shots. So I don't necessarily blame Malik Monk for that. But the Kings need a lot more from that second unit captain. And I put more attention on him and put more pressure on him to provide that than I do Keegan Murray scoring more than 11 points, even though Keegan Murray is a starter, because Malik has been there before, and I know Malik understands his importance. And I tweeted this out before the game. With Domantas Sabonis out, the guard play for the Sacramento Kings, period, has to be elite. And it's not just De'Aaron Fox. I thought Kevin Huerter ultimately had a pretty good game scoring. What did he score? Like 21 points or something like that. So Kevin Huerter, I think for the most part, did his job, but it's Fox, Huerter, and Monk, all 3 of them making a significant impact pretty consistently for the Kings, especially with Domantas Sabonis out, if this team wanted to have a chance. And unfortunately, Malik dropped the ball on that tonight. Alex Len, Rashawn Holmes, Trey Lyles. Like I said, I thought Trey Lyles did phenomenal. I thought Alex Len did his job. I didn't see anything where Alex was bad. Didn't see anything where Alex was particularly great. Rashawn Holmes had some great moments offensively. I think he scored like a quick 6 points when he came into the game the first time in the first quarter, had a push shot right away, and those who are fans of Rashawn Holmes know how important that push shot is and how great that was to see. Like, for the most part, and maybe it's because my expectations were so low, I was okay with what I saw from the center position for the Kings. Again, I did not expect them to really do anything against Nikola Jokic. Just be there. Be a presence. Don't be terrible. Don't get into massive foul trouble. And I thought, as a committee, those 3 bigs, Trey Lyles played that 5 spot when the Kings decided to go small. I thought they did their job, and they did enough for the Sacramento Kings to be okay with it. Now let's talk about Davion Mitchell really quick. And this is ultimately going to be more of a negative topic than it is a positive topic. And I've been thinking about this for a while, wanting to bring this up for a while, and I don't know if it's appropriate to bring it up on a night where he had 9 assists. Like Davion Mitchell distributing the ball with that second unit, I thought Davion Mitchell did an excellent job distributing. Like, if you get 9 assists from Davion Mitchell, that is a win in my book. Every single day of the week, I will absolutely take that, and that's worth celebrating. He only had 6 points. And I think Tim Maxwell pointed it out on Twitter. He's had double-digit scoring nights 3 times this season. Now, I know he backs up the Kings' leading scorer in De'Aaron Fox. So it's not as bad as it could be, and it's not necessarily his role to just score with the second unit. But I think because he's in his second year, and I think because he's as good as he is defensively and he has that defensive reputation, I think that's allowed some of us, myself included, to kind of turn a blind eye towards the lack of offensive impact that he has, lack of scoring impact that he has pretty consistently now. He gets some good looks, misses a lot of them. Doesn't take a lot of shots. Like, I'm not saying that Davion Mitchell's not being aggressive enough, and I understand the Kings' offense is not necessarily asking for Davion to be a go-to scorer or anything like that, and he's trying to fill his role, and I give him credit for that. But especially in games where the Kings are shorthanded, they need more out of him. Tonight, no Domantas Sabonis. Obviously, Sabonis is a center. Davion Mitchell is a point guard. I wasn't expecting Davion to necessarily make up that much for Sabonis' absence, but I got to get more than 6 points. And then when De'Aaron Fox was out earlier this season, Davion Mitchell wasn't giving me much then too. Like, I don't want to bag on the guy because I'm a big fan of Davion Mitchell's. I think Davion Mitchell is extremely important to this team, and he's had more than his fair share of big defensive moments for the Kings. Did an excellent job drawing a charge tonight. I think he's 7th in the league in charges drawn, so he's an important piece. It's not like a take away his minutes type conversation at all. But at some point, I think it needs to be said that offensively, he just simply needs to be better, and I think he knows this. I don't think he's turning to Locked On Kings to get that kind of motivation or to have that kind of wake-up call. Offensively, the Kings simply need more out of Davion Mitchell right now and for the remainder of the season. The Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by this message from the NHTSA. You're hanging out with your friends and putting back a few drinks. A few becomes a few too many. And as the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think of calling for a ride. Nah, you're good. You're fine. You live nearby. You can make it home okay. It's no big deal. You're not that impaired. Everybody knows about the risks of driving drunk, and the results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now trying to and looking for impaired drivers on the roads to save lives. So if you think that you're okay to drive after a few drinks, please think again, play it safe, and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. I'm trying not to be a Debbie Downer because it's not my brand. I like being optimistic. I'm having a hard time feeling optimistic about tomorrow night's game against the Nuggets. If the Sacramento Kings put together that kind of effort, which I don't know if they're going to be able to repeat for a longer period of time than they did tonight, if they were able to build a 20-point lead in this game and that wasn't enough, I don't know how they're going to be able to figure out how to pull out a win against the Nuggets tomorrow, unless Domantas Sabonis becomes available, or maybe Nikola Jokic is a little tired on back-to-back nights, or maybe Michael Porter Jr. has a bad game and Jamal Murray has a bad game. Everybody not named Nikola Jokic has a bad game, and the Kings can take advantage of that. Let's put it this way. The Kings are going to need some kind of help if they want to win tomorrow night's game. It's not out of the realm of possibility for this team, which, of course, is a positive, but I'm expecting the Kings to be recording a somewhat similar podcast to this tomorrow night. Let's just say that. Hopefully I'm wrong. And I'll say this. Normally, I'm not a big fan of players playing through injuries. I understand, like, sometimes an absence is too big for a team to make up, but these players have more than just an 82-game season or a record to think about. They have to think about their careers, their overall health, everything like that. In this case, I think Domantas Sabonis playing through his injury might be a necessary evil. And if he's good to go, if the medical staff truly clears him to go, I think the Sacramento Kings need to get him in the game. They need him. I just don't know. Unless the Kings are going to really try to change the way that they play overall with him out, I don't know how they're going to have any kind of consistent success without him. It's a very steep drop-off, and that's not the fault of the rest of the roster. There's just nobody that can replace Domantas Sabonis, and that leads into a bigger conversation that I want to have on a future Locked On Kings podcast, because I've heard some people say, and people have asked me, like, should the Kings be working the phones, trying to call and trade for another center, or is there anybody in free agency? What about DeMarcus Cousins? Blah, 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 blah. I hear you, and yes, you should always be keeping an eye out on the market for any kind of improvements that the Kings can make, and I think they're still doing that to ultimately solve their backup center problem, although maybe that will be solved with someone getting consistent minutes while Sabonis is out. We'll have to wait and see. I don't know who's out there unless you're finding a way to convince the Denver Nuggets to give up Nikola Jokic. I don't know anybody out there that can do ultimately what Domantas Sabonis does. I don't know what trade out there exists that the Kings don't have to give up way too much to get a player that ultimately drops into a backup 12 to 15 minute a night role when Sabonis comes back and is healthy. The Kings can survive a couple weeks without him, especially if periodically he's playing, even if it's 60, 70% of himself with that broken thumb. Now, if this were an injury where he was out for a month or 2 months and knock on wood, it doesn't become something like that, then the Kings would be that desperate. I don't know if they need to be that desperate necessarily. I think they need to recognize the fact that no Sabonis means it's going to be tough sledding. And when Sabonis does come back, they're really going to need to take advantage of that time and hopefully make up for some of these losses that they're probably going to compile while he is recovering and getting back to normal. The good news is, though, as we get into January, there are a lot of games, especially home games, that are winnable even with Sabonis not at 100% or potentially out. So there might be some light at the end of the tunnel there. I don't know in a trade market or free agency scenario, and again, this is something we'll talk about more later. I don't know who is out there that you can bring in realistically that solves your Sabonis problem or replaces Sabonis more than a tiny fraction. But maybe you have a name or two out there that you think the Kings can go and get. If you do, share that with me. I'm @GeorgeSack on Twitter. Email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com, or leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. As for right now, we are done. We'll be back here tomorrow night in the same spot, hopefully recording more of a cheery Kings win podcast. But tonight, Kings lose to the Denver Nuggets, game 1 of a doubleheader. If you're coming to game 2 tomorrow night, would love to chat with you. Hopefully, I'll get to see you, and I look forward to broadcasting regardless of what the result is. It's always a pleasure to host Locked On Kings. Appreciate your support so much. Until next time, my name's Matt George. You've been listening to Locked On Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.